Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette DeVidar. Welcome to Smart Sustainability on this Sunday, August 1st, 2021. Fire, air, water, earth. No, not the beginning of Avatar you're hearing, but the foundation of what matter in a physical sense is built upon, on the principle of the four elements. In some Native American traditions, there is talk about the four races, meaning the four basic races of humanity, not sub-races, in connection with the four elements. Now, how's that linked, and what can we learn about balance, equipoise, and equilibrium in our society from the interplay of the four elements is what we explore tonight. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nicolette DeVidar. You know by now that once in a while on this show, I like to go a bit deeper and dive into stories, mystical knowledge, ancient traditions, and universal laws, governing principles that add to conventional modern thinking. Because we live in a time where the linear and the nonlinear, the visible and the non-visible, the old and the new are coming together. Human evolution is changing from one vibrational pattern to another. So it feels. Of course, there are different opinions on that. But no matter where you stand and what you believe, it's undeniable that the world is changing right in front of our eyes. And we're changing with it. For example, we increasingly notice that the way we looked at the world in the last hundreds of years is neither sustainable nor the sole truth. Face value isn't the only thing that's there. There's something beyond. Holistic is suddenly becoming a key word again. What used to be accessible and taught to only a few in mystery schools and through oral traditions from generation to generation, fundamentals about the world and the human are now accessible to anyone who hears the call in their hearts. So more and more ancient knowledge, universal divine principles from all races and backgrounds are being shared and reconnected to. And the more we hear them, the more we realize that despite the fact that they may originate from completely different backgrounds, beliefs, cultures, the principles are pretty much the same. The four elements, for example, have made a comeback. In business, in philosophies, you find it in product lines, probably even among your favorite brand, and in selected alternative health practices. So we want to go on a quest of exploring the link between the four basic human races and the four elements, and what we can learn from how the four elements come together to perhaps how we can come together and rise above racial divisions. Who better to talk to about this than Gerald Auger? He's a spiritual leader of Woodland Cree descent who was taught about the four races and the elements. Welcome to Smart Sustainability, Gerald. Let's get right to it. So, of course, we all want to know now, since I gave all this intro, what's the story behind the four races and the four elements? How is it connected from your teachings?
Mama, tawin na uksiman to na naskumaw. Minagita ko ang piyawi ko siya kay sinas ko matyo moktin. Tabi big squeeze tamu, tabi sa wim, tabi wicho heti ko manigan, kanigan stayan, niyo big squeeze kagi siya, inuyan. So I want to thank the Creator first and foremost for allowing me to be here with you, Nicolette, today. And I have to honor the Creator like I do every day as soon as I wake up. Every day I honor the Creator, and I spoke in my Woodland Cree language because that's what the Creator has blessed me with as a human being, and I always need to honor that part of my human being when I address and speak on behalf of my ancestors, the elders, and of course, most importantly, the Creator. So for us, when we talk about the four elements and the four races, there was a time that we were not allowed to speak about the ancient teachings, the ancient knowledge of the ancestors. But they also said we've been told of late that we have to start sharing this knowledge and these teachings with the world, because the world has lost its way. The human being has lost the connection to our Creator, to the higher power that we know as our Creator. And we have lost the spiritual instructions on how to survive and live on Mother Earth. So for the four races, we are told each race has a role to play in a sacred, in a circle of life. Us as the red people, we're given the sacred role and responsibility to take care of the land. And our white brothers and sisters were given a sacred role and responsibility to take care of the element of air. Our black brothers and sisters were given the sacred role and responsibility to take care of the element of water. And our yellow brothers and sisters were given the sacred role and responsibility to take care of the element of fire. And these four sacred elements that we talk about and the four races of the human family, the reason why we're given these sacred roles and responsibility was so we could live in balance, we could live in harmony with all of Creator's creation.
Absolutely.
But we have lost that connection. We have lost that understanding of these sacred roles and responsibilities. Hence why we have the state of humanity where it is right now. So
yeah, I actually think we also have lost a lot of the knowledge when it comes to even understanding the elements and the qualities and so on. I do want to go a little deeper, but I want to stay first a little bit more to learn a little bit more about that tradition. Now, what you just told us, is this being told now among most of the Native Americans, among most of your people or your tribe? And also, do younger generations know about that?
The beautiful thing about the younger generations, we were told that when I went on a 6-year sabbatical and spent 6 years in the wilderness to reconnect with the elders, with the ancestors, with the land, I was given my marching orders when I left in 2015. And they had said to me, the elders and the ancestors had said, that you will know the time has come for the world and humanity to correct itself. When you will see the young people sit at the sacred fire, sit at the ceremonies with the elders to learn about the ancient teachings and the knowledge of our ancestors. And the other thing that I was told, they said there would come a time where the Western world would realize their values, their philosophies, their beliefs do not work. And they would realize that time when there was mass chaos, confusion, mayhem, and destruction happening throughout the land. And that they would come sit at the sacred fire of the red man to relearn life. Today, now in the world I walk in two worlds as a four-directional human being. I walk with a Nike in one foot and a moccasin in the other. But at the same time, I'm able to sit with my Western brothers and sisters in ceremony at the sacred fire and learning from each other and learning how we can walk in balance for the sake of our children and our children's children. So yes, it's like prophecy is playing itself out as we speak. So yes.
So when you think about this, when more and more are being told about how the four races, or actually that there is a link to the four races and the four elements, so there is a shared responsibility, let's put it this way. How do you think this would shape or has shaped, for example, the views of Native Americans, for example, in regards to the whites, or in regards to the history, or in regards to other races? Has that changed anything already, or are we still having to work through a lot of history baggage?
Well, it's changing, but not as the world expected it to change. What I mean when I say that is the elders and the ancestors are finally saying now, the Western world is finally catching up to what we've always known as four-directional people. That the science that they talk to the world about is actually our spirituality. It's just our spirituality. When you talk about science, it's cause and effect, it's observation, it's understanding the universal laws, the laws of nature, and all the other laws that come with it. But then for us, as four-directional people, we can never take ownership for that knowledge, because that knowledge doesn't come from where we're at in this world. It comes from the ancestors. But unfortunately, my Western brothers and sisters who adopted our spirituality and labeled it science, purely from an egocentric mentality, they have broken a lot of Creator's laws. Hence why we have the chaos that we do in this world. Because we are meant to walk, to learn from each other, but we are meant to also to honor Creator's laws, natural law, the laws of nature, and spiritual law. But we have forgotten that. And we now live in a world where we don't know that we are living in a world where people don't know that they don't know. And so it's good to see the scientists that call themselves scientists, they're now starting to realize that there are things that we've always known. And when you overstep Creator's law and those laws of nature, then of course there's going to be consequence. And that's what's happening right now in the world, with Mother Earth is cleansing herself with all these fires that are happening, these natural disasters that are happening, these floods that are happening. There's increase in tornadoes because Mother Earth is showing us as human beings that who's in charge is her. Because without her, we will cease to exist. So and there's a saying that goes, hell hath no fear like a woman scorned. And really, Mother Earth is saying, I give you life every day, the air that you breathe, the water that you drink, the land that you live on, and everything else that comes with it. And you're not honoring me for who I am, is what Mother Earth is saying to the world. And that's a part of it, right? So.
Yeah, I think though very similar to you. I think in our traditions, and there are many mystery schools that are out there. There are many teachings that used to be literally just handed down or passed down to a select few about those spiritual dimensions, about the universal laws, about the fundamentals. But I think we see generally a huge increase right now that this is made accessible to a lot more people. In other words, actually to anyone who's really open to it and open to receive and look beyond those boundaries. So let's talk a little bit about how this comes together, because to me I think this is really a very essential point. When we look at the four elements, fire, air, water, earth, and I think one of the main things we need to address is the fact that when you even look at the human beings, when those elements are not in balance, people get sick. We're imbalanced. We get ill-tempered. A certain character element sort of is taken over by another, depending on what it is. So, for example, when someone has too much fire in them, they are very, short-tempered. They go off like a fuse, and things like that. When you have too much water in it, then people usually tend to have a tendency for depression, for feeling too emotionally engaged, or when the emotions take over, so to speak. So, what I'm getting is when you look at the optimal condition, it should be in balance, right? So all four elements should be in balance. When they're in balance in the body, then we are in good health, we're in good spirit, we are in unison, so to speak. And when they're not, then obviously there's disease, there's imbalances, as you said. That's kind of what's happening in nature right now as well. So given that knowledge, though, and I'm going to say this knowledge has been around among people from all walks of life for a long time, and yet when you look at the races, there have been always some who thought they need to dominate others. So how come that all of these educated, knowledgeable people, I don't want to use education in the classic sense, but the knowledgeable people in that sense that knew about those connections, have not spoken up more at the time when it may have been necessary to say, wait, they should be all in balance and not one dominating or conquering another. What do you think?
Well, a part of now that the world is waking up from a very, very deep sleep, And yes, the air that we breathe is the wind that runs on the back of Mother Earth. The water that we're made of, that we're comprised of, is the same water that covers 71% of Mother Earth, where we're 61% of water. The fire that we talk about from Father and Son is the same spark that's in our heart. Without that spark, there we wouldn't live. And the DNA of the tree is the same DNA in our bones. So we are the land. So, but when we don't live in balance and we don't honor these four sacred elements, and we don't honor ourselves as human beings and honor this vessel that the Creator had blessed us with, being all spiritual beings in a house in this human being, of course we get sick. And the reason why people get sick through stress, through cancer, because they're not living in balance. And when you hold on to something or don't deal with any unresolved trauma, of course it'll manifest itself into cancer, and then you will get sick because it's called consequence. So that's a part of why, and now with Mother Earth, she's getting sick for what we've done to her and how we haven't honored her. And that because we have forgotten those sacred roles and responsibilities, that's why the air is getting sick, the water is getting sick, the land is getting sick, and it's consequence, right? So, so that, and that's why we were told to share. We were, when you want to know the knowledge, the ancient teaching of this knowledge, there are protocols that do come with that. And that is why, because this knowledge comes from the beginning of time. But there has to be protocols, and there are traditional spiritual laws that we as four directional people have to always honor and understand where it is, how, because if you share this knowledge with the wrong person, they could use it and abuse it, and then that'll affect the people. And that's kind of why we have to have that understanding and honor our higher power that we as four directional people know as our Creator. Because we all have one thing we will give our lives for in a heartbeat, and that's our children. So, and that is why they say, as these leaders, these world leaders, need to understand that your words and your actions will affect the people that you are to govern. And same with these scientists that do the work that yes, their intentions may be sincere, but if they don't understand the spirit and the intent behind what they do, then there will be consequence. There is consequence, because that's why the world is in chaos right now.
So that kind of talks a little bit about bringing the paradox together, so the visible and the invisible. So when we focus, for example, on science, very often you focus more on the visible, and then we tend to forget the invisible. But I think bringing these two together is exactly what we're seeing right now. Also, that there is the future has to be able to manage the paradoxes, meaning bringing those different things together, the old and the new, the visible, the invisible, the traditional and the modern. And I think that's kind of something that we're all learning how to move towards. Wouldn't you think so?
I agree wholeheartedly on that, because we were also told, the elders had said about the ancestors, about the unseen. They had said they have forgotten about us here. And only until they start coming back to us for that guidance, that direction, and that healing is the only way life will correct itself. And that because we have put our Creator, our higher power aside, and we are purely operating from ego. When you put ego and you break that down, I've heard edging God out, then you think you're in control. And that then the new higher power for a lot of people, unfortunately, has become money, has become technology. They think that they don't need a higher power. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to take that material, that technology, that money with you when your physical walk is done in this world. And then we have forgotten that, right?
And I actually want to clarify something, which I think also for our viewers actually is really important. When we talk about the material comes in essence from the Latin word mater, which means the mother, the great mother. So it has a lot to do with the earth. So if we, of course, abuse the earth, we abuse the mother, then eventually there's going to be consequences also in the material realm. That I think even that connection is not so commonly understood or known of, or we think about this in day-to-day life.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's a beautiful. I work with the energy industry here in Canada.
Yeah.
And I've had CEOs and presidents I've worked with in these energy industry. They've actually I've had to share with them that when you do this natural resource, when you extract these natural resources from Mother Earth, if you learn and understand how to honor the spirit of the land, it'll replenish itself and it won't get sick, it won't get dirty. And so they've taken the time to do that. And that because they understand, because as we have surpassed the global population, is over 7.4 billion people.
Yeah.
And as the population increases, we're going to need a lot more of those natural resources.
Yeah.
But if we don't understand and honor those natural resources that we extract from Mother Earth, the air, the land, the water, the fire that we use to be able to extract them, and if you don't honor that, of course, there's going to be consequence for that, right? So that's all what we're going to do.
Yeah. Let's talk about for a moment also in terms of some of the principles that I think we need to wave into all of this when you look at the 4 elements, because we're also essentially talking about the masculine principle and the feminine principle. And we actually do have a graphic up that shows that beautiful in terms of where the elements go. So you have fire and air are both associated with the masculine principle, and then water and earth is associated with the feminine principle. And when you look at this rising, this more understanding about caring for Mother Earth, the greater need for more empathy, the greater need for more nourishing, the greater need for more nurturing. Those are all feminine principles. I think it is fair to say that, with all the fire and the world literally about to burn up, water in that case, so the feminine principle in really bringing it back down, grounding it again, calming things down, is something that's on the rise. How do Native Americans or your people particularly see like the balance between masculine and feminine principles?
Well, one of the elders had shared with me that we're all born into water when we're born into this world. And the time that we're in the womb of our mother, if you're female or male, we're female until we're born into this world. But there is male and female in all of us. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you still have, because it's balanced. It's the yin and the yang, right? So, but unfortunately, because of academia, religion, some faiths, and beliefs, they have suppressed and repressed the natural order of why Creator created everything as it was created. And that's a part of why, for us, we believe we all have male and female energy. And that because it's part of who we are as spiritual beings housed in this human being. And that's and that's why in August the 21st of 2017, when the great solar eclipse that happened that covered most of the U.S. That is when the ancestors says that was the day the patriarchal value society system ended on that day at that solar eclipse. And it was the beginning of the matriarchal value society system began on that day, because now that it was the rise of the divine feminine. And of course, what happened later on in 2017 was the Me Too movement. But yes, and that did happen. That happened. But the answers also said it would be the second wave of women behind the first wave that would bring that balance to the world, because we, as the patriarchal society, had forgotten and never honored the matriarchal society. Because that's why the elders had said, we as men are strong physically, but the woman is stronger emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually, because she's a nurturer, a caretaker, and a giver of life. Without the woman, we will cease to exist as a human family. Without Mother Earth, we will cease to exist as a human family. So, and for us as four directional people, we honor the most powerful, the most sacred being. That's how we were taught, that being the woman, that being Mother Earth, because that we understand the true power of this being, the true power of the feminine, and that because that's what brings and gives life every day, and we've forgotten that. So.
Absolutely. Let's talk. Actually, I want to ask you one question here before we go further. So you speak a lot about four-directional people. Clarify for us, please, what does that mean? What are you talking about?
So when I say four-directional people, everything we do, we honor the number four. There are four parts to us as a human being: the emotional, the mental, the physical, the spiritual. There's four cardinal directions that we honor and we understand their role in life, in the circle of life, from south, north, east, and west. There's four times of the day: sunrise, noon, sunset, midnight. There's four seasons: spring, summer, earth, and fall. The four sacred elements: earth, wind, water, and fire. The four stages of life. And that when you're born, when you're young, when you're middle-aged, and when you're an elder, that at all stages in life, who is this Auto that you can come to at those four stages is the one we know as our higher power. And we were given four medicines that we use to be able to walk in balance in this world. So, but at the end of the day, when you really look at it, if you want to go deeper with this, we're all four-directional people as human beings because we're made of these four elements. We're comprised of the emotional, the mental, the physical, the spiritual. But this is the original teachings that my ancestors talked about, that the elders talk about. These are the original teachings even my Hopi brothers and sisters talk about who we are as human beings. So that's what I mean when I say four-directional, and that because numerology has its role in life. It's how you honor the spirit, the intent of that.
Yes.
When it talks about astrology, everything that the world talks about, we've always known that as four-directional people. Because we had that connection to other realms, to the Creator, really, and that's how we came to understand and govern our words and our actions in life, and we knew how to walk and live in balance. But when our European brothers and sisters came, we had to civilize those savages. Well, if we lived in such a civilized society today, why do we have kids killing kids, kids having kids, and all this racial discourse in the world that's happening, all this chaos? And that we understood the natural order, we understood the natural laws, we understood how to coexist on Mother Earth, because we understood the spiritual laws that we were given as human beings. And it's good to see the world coming back to understanding how sacred and what these teachings were for us. So we're just living in the time of prophecy.
Yeah, but just to clarify, so I think this is what I initially said also at the beginning of my intro. So this is a lot of the knowledge, no matter where you stand and what your belief systems are. Those are universal principles that are around the world. Because I've been taught the same things, and I'm not Native American Indian, but I do understand the numbers, because the numbers give legalities to an idea, for example. So there is a lot of knowledge that I think the universal principles, the universal governance, that has been around. And as I said originally, it's pretty much even like the same essence, whether this is within the indigenous people, whether this is within the Jewish people, whether this is within other nations, or if you look at Hermeticism, for example, which is kind of an accumulation of all of that. You hear about these things. It's just that it hasn't been openly made accessible for a long time, because a lot of people who did were either killed. I mean, let's be real about this. They were either killed, or they were moved away, or because they would present, it's an inherent counter argument to actually a structure that was kind of taking hold of the world based on greed, on power, on lust, on whatever it was, that really was basically threatened by these governing principles. And I do want to talk a little bit about the number 4, because I know also we have a graphic on there, which is actually, it looks like the number 4, but it is not the number 4. It's actually the Jupiter sign. So the planet Jupiter, but it's spelled like a 4, but it's also the correlation with the 4, meaning in terms of the number 4, the sacred number 4, as you said, what the number 4 is all about: law and order, stability, wisdom, justice. All of that goes in there. And so few, I think, have sort of, well, dipped into this knowledge to really understand that this is all connected. So I think now, as you said, it's all coming together. What I find interesting is that the basic principles are the same around the globe.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that, Nicolette, because that's what I'm saying. When you really look at it, we're all 4-directional human beings.
Yes.
Because it's a universal truth.
Yeah.
And these laws are universal.
That's right.
And I totally agree with you with that. And that's kind of why for us, we always maintain this knowledge through the ceremonies that we know and through the elders that we have. But yes, there was a time that we were told that we weren't able to practice our ceremonies because they were suppressed and repressed. And that's a part of history that the world doesn't know, that we were told to put away our ceremonies. Well, we were put in prison or ostracized if we practice these ceremonial laws. So, and that happens throughout society. It has happened, yes.
Yeah.
So, and that's why it just common sense when you really look at it. This is why the world is where it is, because the world has suppressed and repressed the higher power. The world has suppressed and repressed these universal laws. The world has suppressed and repressed these universal truths, right?
Yeah.
But it's like everything happens for a reason. And now for us as spiritual people who understand and follow these universal laws and understand these original teachings, we are in a time of great change for a reason. And that because 2 things are going to happen, we were told at this time for humanity, that the world would fall to its knees. And when it fell to its knees, 2 things would happen. They would recognize that they have forgotten their higher power, and that we have become truly pitiful as human beings because we are operating from ego, and that we're at this crossroads right now in the world, right? So, and that's why we as 4-directional people, that our children, everything we do for our children has to be for 7 generations ahead, but we also have to look 7 generations behind before we can look ahead on how, because it's all about balance, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's all about balance. I think that's very true. Let's talk a little bit about the qualities of the elements, if you will. So I know we talked about in a literal sense about fire, water, air, earth. We all know in a literal sense what they stand for. Let's talk a little bit about the qualities, the spiritual qualities of that, because I think that's also something we can learn from, and then maybe we can make the link in terms of what does that mean and how can we really come together and unite as one human race. So can we start with some of the spiritual qualities about air, for example? Do you have something to add on this one?
Well, again, with the pandemic that's happening in the world right now, we have forgotten that element of air gives us life. Without that element of air, we will not be able to live and exist in this world. And then with this pandemic, the ancestors had said, the elders had said, they had said, the human being was sent home for this pandemic to revisit, so that it could revisit and understand how sacred these elements are. And them all being sent home is because now people are realizing how the things we've taken for granted, going for a walk, hugging our grandparents, hugging our children, and that it took the element of air to be able to make us realize how sacred life really is and how we have forgotten that. So for the spiritual quality of air, that's how we are able to to be able to exist as human beings.
Yeah, I would agree in the body. So what I actually connect with air is the mental realm, the mind, the mental realm. There's a certain quality to it. It's light, it's fast moving. It's just as air is, and the word that I would connect with that is the mind in terms of I think. That's how I how I would make the connection between the air as an element versus the others. So the air is, I would say, for the air it represents the thinking. I think. So. And I think it's fair to say when you look at, to use your analogy of the races that you've been taught, it seems to me actually that there is a connotation that, for example, the Caucasian race, the white race as you call it, is very much mind-oriented. So thinking the way we've been brought up, the way we've been taught over the last centuries and so on, was very much reason-oriented by mind. I mean, mind taking over, so to speak. And then when you look at other elements, for example, water is about emotions. It's about the emotional body of the human being. It's about I feel. So that's a component that in most cases up to this point has been pretty much suppressed. Wouldn't you agree? This is something that is coming up to the forefront just now more and more, where we actually feel good about saying, well, let's share about how we feel, and be honest about this, and actually don't have to hide it, but can really say, I don't feel good about this, or I feel like I'm hurt by this, or something like that, which wasn't the case.
Yeah. Well, I guess like when you look at water, we drink water to sustain our bodies. We use water to cook our food. We use water to bathe ourselves. We use water to water the food that we eat, the plants and the animals and all that. It's all interconnected, right? And then that's why even the water that we're comprised of, that's why people, when it comes to a full moon, that's why they get affected by the full moon. Just like when Grandmother Moon pulls in the tide on a full moon, we get affected by that. But if you're living in balance emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, then the full moon, then you won't be as affected by it because you're already living in balance with it, right? But that's why some people will go crazy,
roof walking,
get emotional
and street walking
when
and
it comes
stuff.
to full moon. Yeah, because they're not living in balance, right? And when you talk about the spiritual element of air, where the wind of Mother Earth is what pollinates the world, moves the medicine, moves the land, moves everything for us to be able to, because it has its role in the circle of life, the natural order of life that Creator has created. So that's a part of, without the wind, then the land wouldn't be able to move, to be able to replenish itself, to be able to give us the food that we need from Mother Earth.
Yeah. Fire is will. I will, for example. Very often that's when you have hot-headed people that go and they put will above everything else. So very much that's where the fire element goes in.
Yeah. And when you look at fire, what do we do with fire? Fire warms us in our homes. Fire cooks our food. And we use that element, these four elements, to honor our higher power as well. And so they all have a role, a spiritual role, or a role in life, these four elements. And that's like the land. What does land do? It gives us the food that we need. It gives us a place to be able to live. All of that, it all has a role. All these elements play a role. But all these elements, the earth, the wind, the water, the fire, we're able to honor our higher power through these elements if we do it authentically, if we do it properly, and we do it with love and light. And that is why this knowledge, we are told not to share this knowledge openly to just anybody, because how do we know who we share it with? They won't abuse it and for their own. And that's a part of it why we've always been told to be very mindful of that, because it'll affect us. And so that's why when somebody wants to know the energy industry I was working with, they follow protocol to be able to so I could share the knowledge that's been given to me, because I was told by the elders and the ancestors to start sharing this knowledge, but to be mindful who I share it with and how I share it, right? What I'm sharing it now is just the basic fundamental values of these teachings, right? They go deeper than that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to pick up on one other aspect that you said, which I think is really important. So when we talk about the 4 elements, we're talking about the number 4, and you said then there's the higher power, and that's then what gets us from the 4 to the 5. The 5 being the quintessence, the higher power, literally from above, that we seem to forget. Are we about to learn our lesson?
We are learning the lesson right now. People don't have forgotten that there's a reason why there's a big dipper in the night sky with 7 stars. Just like there's a reason why there's a little dipper in the night sky with 7 stars. There's a reason why there's 7 continents on Mother Earth. There's a reason why there's seven doorways that we have come to know. And there's a reason why there's 7 sacred laws that we've been given to govern our words and our actions. But we have forgotten those 7 sacred laws of love, honesty, humility, courage, respect, wisdom, and truth. Instead, the world is honoring and living the 7 deadly sins of sloth, gluttony, wrath, lust, greed, envy, and pride. And so these numbers that they all, like I said, numerology has its role in life. Numbers have a role in life, and they were created for a reason. Just like the number 5. For me, I see that being the Creator's number. Because when we look at this, it's the 5, right? But
that's right.
That's how I see that, right? So even 3.
And there's a reason why the hand has 5 fingers and not 6 or 7.
And there's a reason why the Creator gave us only 1 mouth and 2 ears, and that we have to learn to listen to the elders that say that. There's a reason why the Creator gave you just 1 mouth and 2 ears to listen with, so because we have forgotten to listen
and
to
2 eyes, the duality that is on the earth.
Well, see, that's the thing about why when my Western brothers and sisters come to when I say to the sacred fire, I tell them the longest, hardest journey you're going to make is from your mind to your heart. Because you have to be willing to unlearn everything you've been led to believe that doesn't speak your truth to your truth. And when we say that, we mean everything you have to be willing to unlearn with the eyes that sit between your mind and your heart, to be able to unlearn everything that you've seen that doesn't speak your truth. Just like you have to be willing to unlearn everything you've listened to that doesn't speak to your truth. Just like everything that's been spoken to you, you have to be willing to unlearn everything that doesn't speak to your truth. Because for us as 4 directional people, our Western brothers and sisters are linear in their way of thinking. It's all about rationale, it's all about logic. For us, we're left-brained in our thinking, because what sits on the left side of your body is your heart. And that's compassion, that's Creator, that's understanding spirit, right? So, and that is why when we say we can never take ownership for the knowledge that we have to suffer for to be able to understand how to honor it properly and authentically, right? So, and I know the latest thing I was told by my higher power that I know as a Creator was saying, the world is about to experience authentic spirituality.
What is authentic spirituality? What would
authentic
you see as
spirituality? There is New Age spirituality. There's different versions of Western spirituality. But for us, when we talk about authentic spirituality, is understanding and walking with humility, walking with understanding those 7 sacred laws, and understanding the spirit of those 7 sacred laws. And that the message was that the world is about to experience authentic spirituality through the dreamscape, through what the world knows as coincidences, which are actually spiritual nuances, and having experiences other worldly experiences that they can't explain. And it's going to affect even the naysayers, the non-believers, just like it's going to affect the believers. And that because there's a reason why this great awakening is called a spiritual awakening. And that so the world is now about to experience that. And that so, and it's really that simple. And
so the transformation is less about the technology revolution, which is an air element, by the way. So technology is associated with the air element. So rather than seeing it as the technology revolution per se, technology is just a tool, but essentially it's about the spiritual awakening.
And we talk about the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is about vibration, it's about frequency, it's about wavelength, right? And that's what technology is. And just like everything that we are taught, from money to technology to religion to academia to faith, it was all created for a reason. It's how you choose to honor all of those. If you honor academia, technology, religion, faith, and money to make yourself a better human being and to make the world a better place, then you're honoring it for what it is. But if you honor it and abuse it for yourself and to hoard it and not to make the world a better place, then you're not honoring it for really what it was.
Yeah, but
this is the wake-up call.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think there's one particular element that I think we're also learning, is that we cannot look at all those different things in silos, but that they only make sense when we look at them in unison, when you actually bring it together. And I think that's what we're witnessing all over the world at this point.
Well, that's what I mean. When you can honor the spirit of all of those, of what I've just talked about. If you honor the spirit of all of that, then you're honoring it. You're honoring the universal truth behind it,
right?
And that because it has its role in the circle of life, right?
So do you think it's possible, Gerald? When we talked about, I mean, we made a long journey in terms of where we started out with the 4 elements and then the 4 races. We talked about the equipoise, that we talked about balance. We talked about all the different shared responsibilities. We talked a little bit about the qualities of the different elements and that each of them has a role. So when you look at that, it seems to me it's pretty straightforward in how it all comes together. How can we navigate this and apply this to the big racial divide that's still happening and bring it together? And when you think about this, so in other words, how could we actually make people, our viewers, ourselves, be more conscious? Maybe next time we see someone or we hear about efforts to make the race divide even bigger, that we look at this and say, wait a minute, so the 4 elements can work together, they all have a role, none is more important than the other. How can we bring it together? What's your take on that?
Well, my take on that, I'm living it right now. I'm part of a movement. I'm working with a band called BANK, the Benevolent Artists National Charity. And this movement is based on love, kindness, compassion, and healing for the 4 races, for our children and our children's children. And it's based on a prophecy. When you talked about your intro about 100 years, one of our foremost leaders, Louis Riel, had said, "My people will sleep for 100 years. And when they awake, it'll be the artist who will give them back their spirit." When we talk about artists, we're talking about music, we're talking about visual, we're talking about dance, we're talking about storytelling. So BANK that's what it's doing. It's becoming a movement where we're wanting to share the world through, as artists, that we all have to learn to come together in love, kindness, compassion, and understand what it is that we are to do at this time. And that's why that's part of how I'm fulfilling what I've been told to do in creating that awareness and that understanding to the human family, to the 4 races, about the 4 elements, on how we need to come together and what's more powerful than walking with my brother, who is a founder of BANK, the Benevolent Artists National Charity.
Right. So knowing all this, looking at the movement, looking at healing, looking at loving, looking at knowledge, looking at, to me actually, when I look at the 4 elements, I'm going to be honest, it looks like you bring together thinking, feeling, and action, which is knowledge, love, and action all coming together. So when we think about where we are right now, what would you tell political leaders all around the world in terms of how they could incorporate that in the messaging, or what would you tell them in terms of, when you look at where we're at right now, what would your advice be for political leaders?
My advice to the political leaders of the world is, you can lie to yourself, to your fellow human being, but you can't lie to the Creator. The Creator knows your reaction before your action in life. The Creator knows your true intentions behind your intentions in life. If you understand the three of love, kindness, and compassion, you will leave something behind as a leader for your children and their children's children. And we all have to learn to come together as one human family. And as leaders, we are told that our words and our actions will affect the ones that we are to lead. If we do good things will come. If you do bad things will come. It's called natural law. And natural law, the world knows natural law as karma. So
yeah. Is there anything in your teachings or in your traditions that talks about the time of how we can get people in the four basic human races more into taking responsibilities for a particular element? Is there any talk about that?
Well, there's talk about this is what we're doing right now. Nicolette is what one of the prophecies that they had said there would come a time Grandmother Spider would cast a web around Mother Earth that would bring unity and knowledge to the world. And now the world is starting to honor this worldwide web that they call internet, is sharing the knowledge to unify the people. But at the same time, when you want to understand the spiritual component of life, you can only do that human to human, and you have to be willing to make the time and make the commitment and sacrifice to go sit with the knowledge keepers. All four races of the human family have knowledge keepers, have elders, and they need to go sit with them to be able to understand the true power and the true essence of what spirituality really is. So.
The universal principles of what the world is really built upon.
Yes.
And what is actually inherent in every living system and every living creature that's out there. The same principles.
Same principles.
That's right.
Because we all breathe the same air, we all bleed the same, and we all live as spiritual beings housed as human beings, right, from the four races. So there has to be, the division has to stop, because if it doesn't stop, then what are we going to leave behind for our children and their children's children, right?
Yeah. So when you look at this, though, there are some who would say the division is actually willfully made at this point. And I think actually when we look at things, one could probably conclude that I think there are a lot of things that really willfully divide people even more into the categories and kind of pit one against the other. What would you say to people, what will you say to our audience in terms of what to look out for to not fall into that trap?
To understand that there will come a time where we will all go back home to our Creator and go on our spiritual journey. And there will come a time that you will be asked this one question as you go on your spirit journey before you enter and go into the spirit world is, what did you do to help humanity? And there is really understanding to be nice, to be kind to each other, to be nice to each other, but learn to heal. Because if you don't heal, then there is always going to be division. And that you have to learn to be able to walk in balance emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And that then the only way you will understand and accept the sacredness of life is when you can walk in balance, right? So.
Yeah. Let's talk about this for a second, though, Gerald, because healing is a broad word. And when we look at healing, what do you understand as healing?
Well, for me, healing is living in balance emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. But the world has forgotten what healing looks like. The world has forgotten what healing feels like. The world has forgotten how to heal, because they will give you, here's a pill to numb what it is you're feeling. And they're not honoring the spiritual component when it comes to healing. And that you can look at the emotional, the mental, the physical. But if you miss the spiritual component of your being, then you'll never find that balance, because they're not all in sync, right? So, but for me, healing is being able to talk to my sister and learn to be willing to learn from each other so we can coexist and make the world a better place. That is what healing looks like. For me, that's what healing is. Because I have a grandson, I have a granddaughter, I have a son.
Yes.
And that's...
And that's a beautiful image, actually, the idea of learning from each other. Let's talk a little bit. We have about 3 minutes left. I do want to talk a little bit about how we can actually learn from each other. So taking Native American traditions, how can we, from the Western culture, more learn or partake about Native American traditions in day-to-day life? And I'm not talking about going to the museum or so. I think, yes, that's a great museum. You can go there and visit. You can also do some research. But are there some other things you would suggest that we could possibly do to learn from each other?
Well, here in Canada right now, unfortunately, they're finding unmarked graves of children that went to these residential schools that the U.S. they have them as boarding schools. A lot of my white brothers and sisters are just devastated and they can't understand how this could happen. So they're all reaching out to me and saying, Gerald, how can I change this? What can I do to make this better for your people? And I tell my white brothers and sisters are reaching out and they say, you just did it by reaching out to me and wanting to know more about who we are and wanting to learn and wanting to do your part to correct the wrongs that were done in history to my people. It's really that simple. And so that's why I tell them, is that just you, by the fact of reaching out to me and saying, what can you do? That's where it begins. And that these residential schools were real. And there's more, unfortunately, that are going to be uncovered. And that's a part of it, right? So.
Yeah, that's also part of the transformation and change processes, because a lot of things are coming to the surface and we talk about healing. There's a lot we have to wade through. That being said, though, it's all about equipoise. So obviously, I said, what can we do to learn from each other? Is there something that we can do, or where perhaps Native Americans can learn more from other demographics?
What we just did, Nicolette, just taking the time to converse, taking the time to ask each other, what do you think about this? That's really all it really takes. And that is just reaching out to your fellow human being and saying, what can you teach me and what can I teach you? And let's do it together. But that's a part of it.
Final word for this evening, Gerald. What would you tell people in terms of remembering tomorrow a little bit more about, here's the 4 races and there are the four elements, and how can we tie this in? What do you want people to take from this tonight?
It would be to tell the audience that we're at a very critical crossroads in time, and that we all have to learn to come together and live in light, love, light, kindness, and compassion for our fellow human being. And that because if we don't do that, we're not going to leave anything behind for our children and their children's children. And just to learn to love thy neighbor.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks, Gerald, for being with us. Thank you so much for watching. It was definitely a very interesting theme. Actually, also a very difficult theme because I think it's quite difficult to make the connections and connect the dots. If you do want to know more about this, you can read up on it. You can also check us out on our Facebook page, Smart Sustainability TV, and learn more about that. And we see you next week. Have a wonderful night.